welcome to the deep dive. We often look at things that seem really familiar, almost mundane, and try to uncover the surprising story hiding underneath.
Yeah.
And today we're tackling something many of you might say every single week, the Apostles' Creed.
Right. Very familiar to many.
It feels so routine, doesn't it? Part of the furniture to worship service.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I told you its very existence points to a time when Christianity was actually facing, an existential threat?
That's exactly it. The story behind this creed, it's not some quiet academic exercise. It really came out of what historians describe as a pretty severe crisis, a time that genuinely threatened Christianity's survival in its very early days.
Wow. Okay. So in this deep dive, we're going to dig into why it was created, how it's maybe different from other church teachings or doctrines we hear about, and also look at the sometimes tragic consequences when sacred texts get misunderstood. And importantly, what does this history mean for you today? Because it sounds like this is way more than just words we recite. It's like a historical artifact born from real desperation, right? To protect the absolute core of the faith.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting, maybe counterintuitive, is that the big threat wasn't, soldiers banging down the door. It wasn't external persecution, not primarily anyway.
Oh.
The real danger was internal. It was what you might call an interpretive crisis.
An interpretive crisis? What do you
Let's think about it. The gospel spreads like wildfire across the Roman Empire. Suddenly, it's bumping up against all these really different cultures: Greek philosophy, Hellenism, Jewish traditions, Hebraism, Roman, Latin ways of thinking.
Okay, I can see how that would get messy. Different worldviews trying to process the same message.
Exactly. So you had people hearing the same stories, reading the same scriptures, but interpreting them completely differently based on their own cultural background, their own assumptions.
Right. So it wasn't just minor disagreements. This was actually dangerous.
Oh, profoundly dangerous. It wasn't just, you see it this way, I see it that way. Core Christian beliefs started getting twisted, distorted. And this caused huge divisions in the early church. It really threatened to tear the whole thing apart from the inside.
So you're saying this internal confusion, this interpretive problem, was actually a bigger, more fundamental threat than Roman persecution. That's quite a statement.
I think so, yeah. Because the risk was that Christianity could just get watered down, absorbed into these other cultures and philosophies, and basically just disappear, lose its unique identity entirely. It was a genuinely dire situation for the early leaders.
Wow, a dire crisis indeed. So what do? How did the church respond to this chaos?
Well, this is where the church fathers, the early church leaders, step in. They saw this happening, the confusion, the division, and they realized, okay, we urgently need to nail down the absolute core of our faith.
Define it clearly.
Yes, precisely. Establish a unified standard, something solid to push back against all these, frankly, erroneous interpretations that were popping up everywhere.
And that's where the Apostles' Creed comes from. Did they just, have a meeting and hammer it out?
Oh, not at all. It wasn't a weekend retreat project. The Apostles' Creed was the result of literally hundreds of years of intense discussion, deep reflection, constant refinement. It took a long, long time.
Hundreds of years. Okay, that puts it in perspective.
Yeah. And it's important to understand, it's not just a list of Bible verses stitched together.
Right.
It's more like the compressed essence of the core truths found across the entire Bible. It represents the fundamental framework of faith. Its purpose was very specific: to be that standard, that measuring stick against all the heretical ideas and distorted readings floating around.
Okay, that makes sense. But it raises the question for me. If the creed is that foundational, how is it different from, say, doctrines or dogmas? Because those are important teachings too, aren't they?
That's a really crucial distinction to make. Yes, doctrines, dogma, they are definitely important teachings. Often they come out of specific theological debates in a particular time period or cultural setting. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, doctrines can sometimes shift or be reinterpreted, maybe even revised as, times change or we gain new theological insights. Think about, say, certain doctrines from the Reformation. Hugely important then. But applying them rigidly or literally today might not always fit, and sometimes clinging too tightly can even, hinder faith development in some ways.
Ah, I see. So doctrines can be more context-bound, maybe? A bit more fluid, depending on the era?
You could say that, yeah. Whereas the Apostles' Creed, it's aiming for something much more fundamental. It's like the bedrock.
The bedrock. I like that.
Yeah, it's meant to be a timeless standard that defines the core identity, the basic structure of Christian belief, something that holds true across different eras. It's kind of the creed above creeds, the reference point for how we understand Scripture and live out our faith.
That really clarifies the difference. And thinking about the dangers of getting interpretation wrong, you mentioned the consequences were severe.
Oh, incredibly severe. History shows some really stark examples. I mean, it got so bad at one point in the medieval church that effectively ordinary people were prevented from reading the Bible for themselves.
Wait, they weren't allowed to read the Bible?
Yes.
Seriously, that sounds completely counterintuitive.
Well, allowed is maybe strong, but access was made incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
The official Bible was Latin. Services were in Latin. Languages most people didn't understand.
Why would they do that?
It seems extreme now, right? But it was a reaction, the damage caused by incorrect interpretations, the heresy spreading, the communities being torn apart. It had gotten so out of control, they saw restricting access as a way, maybe a desperate way, to stop the bleeding.
Wow.
It was an extreme measure, absolutely, and had its own negative consequences, of course. But it shows just how catastrophic they viewed the problem of misinterpretation. It underlines the sheer destructive power it can have.
That's a really painful piece of history. It vividly shows how misunderstanding core texts can warp things for individuals, for communities, even for history itself.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if they took such drastic steps back then because they saw the danger so clearly. Are we maybe underestimating that danger today?
That's a very pertinent question.
Because it does seem surprising how many believers, maybe even some church leaders, don't always seem to grasp the historical weight, the deep meaning behind the creed. Sometimes it's just, rattled off as a formality.
Or even removed entirely from services sometimes.
Right. And based on what you're saying, taking the creed lightly or ditching it sounds almost like dismantling your own defenses while the threat is still out there.
It's a fair analogy. While maybe the awareness of how critical interpretation is has faded a bit compared to those crisis periods, the danger itself hasn't vanished. Not at all. It's just perhaps mutated.
Mutated how?
Well, it's often more subtle now, more complex. You still have, obvious challenges from groups with very unorthodox readings. You mentioned Shinkyonji earlier, known for its highly controlled interpretations. That's one type of threat. But there are also much more subtle distortions of Scripture that can sneak into mainstream thinking, even within the church itself. It's less about outright heresy sometimes, and more about gradually twisting or neglecting core truths. And in some ways, that subtlety might make the danger even more, severe, because it's harder to spot.
Mm-hmm. Harder to spot. That's a sobering thought. So let's really hammer this home. The Apostles' Creed, it isn't just some prayer we memorize. It's not just a ritual.
Not at all.
It's this historical achievement, right? Honed over centuries, specifically built to guard the very heart of Christian belief against fatal errors in understanding. It really is an absolute standard for faith.
That's the core of it. And when you personally confess the Apostles' Creed, you're doing more than reciting words. You're actively plugging yourself into that deep, often fierce history.
Connecting yourself to that lineage.
Exactly. It's an act of saying, yes, I stand on this core, timeless faith, the one preserved through all those struggles.
And if you understand that, if you grasp its meaning and its history, then saying it stops being mere repetition.
Right.
It becomes a living confession. And that understanding, that living confession, can actually be a powerful shield, can't it? To protect yourself in a world just flooded with confusing ideas and, as you said, subtle distortions.
Precisely. It equips you. It grounds you.
Okay, so as we wrap up, let's broaden the lens a bit. A final thought for everyone listening to maybe chew on.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about religious texts. Think about this. Beyond religion, what about other crucial documents or foundational ideas, things that form the basis of, our scientific knowledge, our legal systems, our political philosophies?
Foundational texts in other areas.
Yeah. If we just accept those foundational things without really digging into their original meaning, their historical context.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we could be maybe unknowingly distorting their essence too, twisting their impact without even realizing it?
That's a powerful question to consider. How deeply do we engage with the foundations of our other belief systems?
Exactly. Something to really ponder as you go about your week, encountering all sorts of information and ideas.